How are you? So, good afternoon, everybody. How are you? Good. We have very interactive panels. How many people have been to a panel before that I've moderated? And yet you come back. I don't understand it. It's great. I always scare my panelists, and I don't think I've ever done a panel with anyone on this panel before. So they're all terrified writing me going, well, what are we going to talk about? Well, we're going to talk about what you do for a living. So here are the ground rules. Ask questions whenever you think of them. Don't wait till the end. If somebody says something you don't understand, ask the person next to you to ask that you don't understand if you're embarrassed. You pick the friend next to you saying, would you ask that question for me? Try and keep it really seriously, as interactive, as conversational as possible. I always explain the way. This is probably my 100th panel for Victor. I started doing panels for him in '93, and as I say, yet he still asks me back. We're having lunch right now, and the audience is sitting at the table next to us, and every once in a while they lean in and go, hey, can you explain what you were just talking about? So what I'd like everybody to do is introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your company for a minute or two, and what's the most interesting piece of social media entertainment you've seen in the last month? Randy, we start with you, and what happened to our phone call on Saturday?
I apologize. I was caught up signing contracts.
Okay. He used the I'm signing a big deal thing. I sat by the computer for 2.5 hours waiting for his call. Not really. But I told him that to make him feel bad. So, Randy, go ahead.
I did feel bad. Hi, can you hear me? No, check. Is that better?
Cash.
Nice. My name is Randy Ross. I'm the founder and CEO of Cinematique, and Cinematique is a interactive video platform that changes any video into a very multidimensional user experience. Imagine YouTube or Vimeo or an embeddable platform like that is seamlessly tracking everything on screen, so users can interact and get more about anything that they're interested in. And it could be the location, it could be the character, could be deeper narrative, and of course the ability to monetize product placement. And then after that, users can save whatever it is that they're interested in and that they've touched, so that there's a longer engagement than just this passing view. And we believe that it's
dive a little deeper into that. So give me a for instance. So I'm watching. Give me something you guys have done recently.
So for instance, I'm watching a documentary about a guy that's recently been incarcerated, and it's really interesting. And he's talking to his friends inside. The interview is interviewing everyone inside that's in the prison for the same thing.
You interviewed Suge Knight?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so you touch on Suge. Now you've saved him. He's now something that's saved to your boutique. And 2 months later, after the video's sort of come and gone, the content creator can update that information with new information on this character, and potentially they've been released from prison, and now the narrative lives on, the documentary lives on. We're no longer confined to just this, this single purpose edit, but rather, these things become sort of dynamic narrative or dynamic education, and you can consistently do that, and you can now strategize around that, and time release, or allow people to go down rabbit holes and whatnot. And of course, at the same time, you can then offer incentives on product that's been touched and things that people took interest. You can now convert that, down the line into either more engagement or actual monetization and driving them to product pages and whatnot.
Very cool. And what's something you've seen that you wished you did, or something that you thought was very cool?
Trying to think of something that I saw. Come back to me on that, because I'm going to take too much time.
Okay, we'll give you.
Hi, I'm Meredith Gruen. Can you hear me okay? Hello?
I think they all need a little bit more level to sound gravitas.
Yes. Is that better? There we go. My name is Meredith Gruen. I'm an account lead for social media and content marketing at Team One. Team One is a fully integrated ad agency. We are a division of Saatchi & Saatchi, and we focus on advertising for luxury and aspirational brands. So brands like Lexus, the Ritz-Carlton, and Indian Motorcycles. And so I have plenty of examples from our clients of stuff that I love. Probably one of my favorite recent examples of social entertainment is what we've done recently with Lexus's entertainment platform called L Studio. And I can certainly talk much more about it and
We'll
where
go
it
into
came
it for
from.
a moment. Go ahead.
Sure. So in 2008, Team One and Lexus teamed up on this platform called L Studio. And the insight at that time was that in order to change perceptions and to reach a younger consumer who was more and more tuning out traditional advertising, that content was an avenue that was very potent for reaching that consumer, something that now I think we all understand readily and take for granted. But in 2008, this was the early days of YouTube. This was the very beginning of platforms like Hulu and Netflix had just launched its streaming service. We actually worked with Lexus at that time for them not to only be an advertiser, but actually to also be a publisher and launch their own entertainment channel. And during that time, which is very different than now, digital content was very different than what you would see on TV. If you think back to 2008 and what digital content was in those days, in the early days of YouTube, premium is not necessarily how you would describe something that you saw on your computer. So when we're talking about a brand like Lexus and what would really change perceptions for them, premium content was a priority. So we worked with them to launch a platform that was subscription-style TV without a subscription or a TV. So content that you would see on an HBO, on a Showtime, but you can actually see content of that quality on any device.
So give me an example of that kind of content.
So a great example is, are you familiar with the show Web Therapy with Lisa Kudrow that's now on Showtime? That show actually started as digital episodes on the L Studio platform.
Cool.
So it's been around now for several years. What my favorite thing that we've done with it recently, knowing that today's landscape is so different, premium content now, the idea of subscription style without a subscription or a TV, everyone's watching any sort of content, always on demand on any device, realizing the role that social media now plays in the discovery of and engagement with content. We migrated the digital platform from a standalone microsite to a completely custom front end powered by Tumblr. So we're now completely discoverable via a social network where a millennial generation is already engaging, and everything we put up on a website is now filtering through an entire network for increased discovery through social media.
And are you a channel on a Roku or a Fire TV or?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet, but
Watch
yeah.
this space.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks.
All right, I'm Judy Johnson. I'm Director of Product Management for Bottle Rocket. At Bottle Rocket, we build a product platform for enabling iOS, Android, and over-the-top creation and delivery of video content and creating an interactive experience for users. So our clients include people like NBC, Sci-Fi, USA, Telemundo, Scripps, HGTV. So a variety of different content types, not just drama. We've got news, we've got travel, we've got food, a variety of different things of how you incorporate that into a really good experience. And I think my example of the most interesting social entertainment I've seen lately isn't something we created. I'm kind of sad about that, but I wish it was something we created. It was recently, I live in Dallas, so the Cowboys are huge in Dallas. Love them or hate them, they're huge in Dallas. And
Hate 'em.
there's a company that is working on some there's a company that is working on some technology. They're trialing it out during one of the last games where people would sign up and maybe during the game, comments about the plays that are coming up, predicting what's coming up in the plays, and it would involve where you were location-based. So it would encapsulate all this and then check to see where people are in the most locations and then provide congratulations, everybody here gets a free appetizer in this location because they could pinpoint that you were all in a specific bar or specific area. So it's combining things that weren't only going on in the game, but where the user's location was and what the feedback are that users are giving about the game. It was a really interesting technology, and it was getting people involved not just in the plays or what was happening, but based on where they were, that started bringing conversations up. I happened to be in one of the bars, and it was really interesting just to hear how people were playing off the technology.
Did you watch it go down in a location?
I did watch it go down in a location.
So what were some of the comments around that? I mean, do people want to interact as much as we believe they do? Because I always worry about that. We're the people who think that everybody wants to do this. Sometimes you just either want to watch the game or throw something at the TV.
I don't think people want to interact during watching a drama, for instance, something you're enthralled in. I think sports is probably a really good thing around that. There's a lot of time between plays. There's a lot of time to socialize on top of that. And I think it's going to be very content specific in what works and what doesn't. You'll find, though, if you're in a bar, you're probably around social people anyway. So people that are wanting to interact, people that are wanting to talk about their experience are going, no, I think we all should say this is going to happen because we'd really like to win something here. Or, we want to get we want to elevate where we are. There got to be really a kind of a group mentality going on when talking about it, and actually some pretty good conversations back and forth. No, he's not really going to throw that pass. You think he's going to throw to him, So it really kind of spurred a lot of not just digital conversation, but a lot of face-to-face conversation. So I thought the location-based service part of it was a really interesting twist. And none of us knew each other going in, well, other than the people that you're at your own table, right? So it's not a bunch of people showed up. It kind of formed social circles just in the act and what it was doing.
And how did they discover it? How did they even know sitting in a bar that this was happening?
The bars promoted the bars promoted it,
Okay.
Saying, "Hey guys, there's this app. We'd love you to try it out." It was a company that was trying to say, "Hey, let's give this." It was a trial run. It's the first run. I think it's probably going to end up being very successful. I think you're going to see it rolling out nationwide.
Very cool.
Yeah,
Question?
Did you say the name of the app?
I didn't.
What is it? Come on.
So, and here's the thing. I happen to be at the bar, so I'm trying to sit here, and it was like Fanyata, if that's what I'm thinking.
Fanyata?
Fanyata.
Okay.
Yeah.
No more fact checking.
I know.
Somebody else had a question? It was the same question. Oh, same question. Okay.
Because you're all wanting to be social.
What do
and
your
things.
shirts say?
My shirt?
Yeah.
Oh, Gulfstream.
Oh, okay. I thought it was sci-fi. Okay. It's kind of.
Yeah,
You're
you know, I'm Brian, but before I introduce myself, I was actually thinking just like building on that, if that's
Right.
cool.
No,
You're
it's a conversation. We're
Yeah,
having
so
lunch.
we're talking about
Who's buying?
different user types, and my company in the past has created a lot of games, and we're really familiar with something that's called the Bartles gamer types, and it's a way to describe different ways that people play video games, and so there's a lot of research that's gone into the video gaming industry, and we've got behavioral psychologists involved now and all kinds of crazy stuff. But just at like show of hands, who here plays games? Right, so it's already a percentage of the audience, right? And it's the same thing like who watches dramas, who watches sports, it's going to be a percentage of. And then percentage of that, it's like who plays shooters, who plays adventure games, who plays, and there's different, depending on what your personal interests are, you might engage in games in a different way. So I think we haven't done the work yet in as far as entertainment goes to know, okay, well, who are like the social animals when it comes to like sports versus drama or whatever, and I imagine that we're going to be able to draw some circles around those with some research in the future. But so I'm Brian Marr. I'm Chief Strategy Officer for a company called Smashing Ideas. I also teach a Master of Communications class at the University of Washington on advertising and branding and digital media. Smashing is we call ourselves a design consultancy. So we're an agency, but we're not an advertising agency. So our focus is on building applications, websites, products, and platforms. And so the apps and websites you guys probably get, done maybe some things that you've heard of, maybe not. On the products and platform side, that is everything from like an Internet of Things, like a smart water bottle or something like that connects to something else, probably not too far off, we're doing a lot of stuff with sensors and other technology. On the platform side, we built Sony's TV delivery system essentially globally, so we can serve up different content in different markets, all the right size, the right formats and all of that, so that they can localize it in the markets and get it out a lot faster than they could before. It's the simple view of it. As far as something cool that I've seen recently. It isn't something that we built, but there was this creative director, an art director that I used to work with, who works at an agency called Heat now, not the basketball team, but advertising. And they were working on, also another football reference, they were working on Madden, the video game of Madden. And in partnership with the NFL and Google, they put out ads that ran right after big plays that were where they actually replayed that play using Madden players. They were actually able to take what happened on TV, instantaneously turn it into a movable ad, and then turn it into something that you could like create a meme on top of. So immediately, big hit, you know, a Niner hitting a Seahawk or something like that. Immediately online. Immediately you could type over the top of it and trash talk your friends and post it to Facebook. And so it was a way for people to interact, and especially that audience that were playing the games and loved trash talking their friends. And that was sort of the connection on it. So big technology and ad mashup.
Very cool. Last but not least, Jim.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jim Macarthur. I'm a creative technologist. I'm the least employed of the group here, I think. I actually work, I have a startup that I've been working on for the last year that I won't bore you with, but I do a lot of consulting and advertising. I've spent the last 10 years working for WPP within several agencies, working specifically on high technology initiatives for Johnson & Johnson, Rolex, other companies like that. I'm currently working with an agency out of San Diego called IDEA. We're the agency of record for Eddie Bauer and UFC and some other cool brands where we're doing a lot of crossover work between just what you'd consider a normal campaign and content creation and social and Internet of Things, a lot of stuff like that. As far as neat things I've seen recently, I thought...
something you're jealous of that you wish you'd thought.
Yeah, no, actually...
We're going back to Randy for he's had a lot of time to think about it.
Oh, you're going back that way? Or you want me
Well,
to
no, I want you to go, and then
because he was going to probably steal
steal
mine.
listening to everybody else's.
I'm planning on it, yeah.
Aside from everything Star Wars, which, by the way, the trailer, if it came out, I'm going to leave and go watch. My buddy Simon Cho at Hyundai, working with InOcean, jacked Instagram for like a whole day. I don't know if you guys saw this, where they created 18 separate accounts and drove 400 different images through a quiz, which helped people choose between 3 different SUVs once they engaged anywhere within the ecosystem. I thought that was really clever and made Instagram really angry. That was awesome. And then, I think another one, which I thought was my favorite, is the use of Bethesda software and Tinder. They embedded characters from the mobile game for Fallout as Tinder profiles. So as you were swapping left and right, you would actually then get sent to the App Store, which I have absolutely no idea. I didn't actually see any of that in action. My wife's over there, but I did read about it, and it was awesome.
I heard.
Very well done.
Okay. So, Randy, you've had some time?
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing, and it wasn't necessarily, like a really witty campaign or anything like that, but watching the ads that were placed on Instagram for the Steve Jobs movie, and ironically watching people argue about Steve Jobs and everything that comes along with that on Apple devices, in a realm where they wouldn't otherwise have been able to argue about this.
I thought Apple would have filtered those out.
Right, or something. Okay. And that it's an Aaron Sorkin film, and of course, here they are on Facebook, Instagram, arguing about the subject matter. Was just the irony of it all playing in over social media, I thought was interesting. And a lot of the comments that did or did not recognize it.
So, I mean, historically, there's been a certain rejection by people if they feel they're being played, if stuff is advertorial, and it feels like they're watching an infomercial. I mean, the best, if you live in LA here, is Sunday morning when it cuts from, ABC with George Stephanopoulos into somebody sitting there talking about Anderson Windows going, how did you get here today? Well, I bought the hour of time on the station. That's how I got here. So as we go into using social media to create engagement, what are you seeing that is at this point being rejected and what's being embraced? I mean, we talked a little bit about it, but what are the ones that are going to, I guess we shouldn't have gone there? And this is for open question for anybody. I'm not throwing.
I think at a fundamental level, we see it, things that are being rejected, things that aren't taking necessarily the experience or the authenticity of that experience into account. And people just don't want to be sold things unless it benefits them. And we see certainly engaging content and exciting ways of putting things towards people as value. And they value that as much as we do. So when there's an equal value trade, people are more likely to opt into it.
We keep talking about authenticity. We want to have a conversation. We want authenticity. What really is it? Who does the best job of coming across as authentic, or are there authentic conversations?
I mean, in our realm, it's different because we're not necessarily we're a technology that's providing a ubiquitous solution for everyone to build in their own understanding of that. And so from our perspective, it's not about necessarily. We see different results, of course, of how organic or not people's videos and the content that goes along with it are. But really, for us, it comes down to allowing people to choose what they're into and, get lost in the experience rather than have things pushed at them. So it's, more of a less of, and this is sort of ambiguous compared to individual campaigns, but it's really about, how do you make something where people can specify their interests as opposed to telling them what their interests should be and either getting a getting a yes or no answer in or out. How do you make something where they can give you, 10 different answers, and then you can sort of go from there and segmenting them and reapproaching them all?
Jim, you were nodding your head like you had some thoughts there.
I mean, it really depends on the medium. Creative drives it all, right? If it's cool and people like it, social will drive it. I think that's sort of like a never-ending truth. But the other part is, you talked about opting in. People don't want to feel like they've been tricked into something. So being, smart with how you set up the social interaction, how you engage people, put them in the funnel. These are all things that if you're, thinking about your social campaigns properly should make sense. Which is different than viral, right? Viral sort of like, just like, wow, that was cool. And viral that's well planned, I counter is actually social. So, question?
Yeah.
So you mentioned the Bartles player types,
Yeah.
and they've driven a lot of social mobile gaming ad spends over the past few years. How much of that segmenting is being used by other verticals than gaming?
You mean like advertising?
Player profiling specifically, like the idea of hyper-targeting certain types of people across social media.
Oh, that's
That's the holy grail. I mean, that's all
Yeah.
anybody wants. So that's where all the money's going. Everything is being developed, not into Bartles archetypes, but generally speaking, really finite user types that are segmented into platform-specific, interest-specific, a million different metrics. There are entire companies and industries focused on that.
Back into content, which you said is the key driver.
I mean, and that's where, in the end, companies who have, like a lot of companies have wholesale gone on to content management system or engagement systems like Adobe, right, where they want to serve up super hyper customized content across a global customer base. The reality of it is that there's only so much machines can do right now. Those companies are finding out to scale, to actually do one-to-one marketing, which is the dream, is actually a lot of horsepower, which is why you're seeing these content farms developing not only in the networks, like WPP just spun up a whole company called Colloquial, which is literally that, all on a plate, all the way through to third world commoditized or developing world commoditized content factories all over South America and Asia. So
Elaborate on that. So what's a commoditized content farm?
Wonderman having 450, 500 people writing content for Ford out of South America every day of every minute of every day, for every global market, being driven from these very specific commoditized content farms. I mean, if you go to, it's just like dev farms in the developing world. You're seeing that now with content as well.
or like farms.
Yeah, like farms. Yeah, totally. All this stuff, is being driven by.
How do they have the
horsepower.
cultural? How can they have the cultural connection in South America to develop content for other parts?
Well, I mean, in the end, it's one of those things where it's driven by a creative brief, and
Okay.
it goes into the individual markets. Real hyper localization, though, to your point,
okay.
is done in market.
Okay.
Yeah, we see this as well in terms of how do you take the data and actually have it prove return with the quality of the content, and where do you get to the point where it starts to have diminishing return. We recently did a campaign on Facebook with 15-second video ads, over 1,000 different custom ads based on the user targeting. So each video was different based on interest, geography, demographics, all of the various data from first-party and third-party data that we could put together on these different targets. And
Were they customized on the fly, or were these different versions?
they were different versions that were all created and served on the fly based on the different data targeting.
So it wasn't modifying itself on the fly. You were just
Not-
serving up the right.
right,
Okay,
serving up
fine.
the right
I mean,
ones.
which is great.
Right, and it's really based on the technology that Facebook has available right now to how
Right.
they can serve the ads.
Right.
And we found that without necessarily saying, hey, you're getting this because we know X, Y, and Z about you, just having the content that was customized enough to have a nod to someone's interest or have a nod to someone's geography, you do see a lift in performance as long as that content is engaging in the way that it's targeting.
Yeah, I have to say, when you were asking her question, I did a session. Anybody know who Brian Solis is? Brian Solis? So I interviewed him, and we're about 4 minutes into it. It was an hour interview, but we're about 6 minutes into it, and I said, so you do brand activation campaigns. Explain the ISIS brand activation. And he dove into it after he said, get me a drink. But I realized that I was going to have a hell of a time getting out of it. And it was a really great conversation about how ISIS was shaping minds and causing people to put on vests. And I'm going, how do I get out of it? And all of a sudden the heavens parted, and there was someone like you sitting down front who said, how can I use the ISIS brand strategy to break my band? And I was like, oh, God, thank you. So, which brings the question in a semi-serious way of the tendency to imitate as opposed to innovate. So how do you not look at something that you thought was really cool and imitate it as opposed to using it for inspiration for the next level of innovation when you go through the creative process? So it might be something you might want to jump into.
Yeah, sure. I mean, one of the things that we're talking about up here is sort of the operationalization of, if that's even a word, that's a big word to get out, but of social and things like content farms and click farms, link farm or like farms, all these things that are basically driving uplift and driving ability to get content out there and drive it up. There's the flip side of that, which is, and this is I guess the world that I more or less come from, is the user first world, and that's like we're in this weird spot in this industry where we're storytellers and trying to get the story out, and that's the service that we provide to our consumers, and we have this beautiful story to tell, and here it is, and you're welcome for it. And the way that things have evolved with digital is that this is the genesis, like this is the whole reason that we have this conference here, that people want to be part of the story now, right? So you can do that in sort of an operationalized way, or there's other companies that have really gone to that user first model and really tried to understand like what is a big core insight that our entire audience here is looking at, and then what can we do to feed and build upon that with authenticity. And I was looking at trying to think of other examples to bring in. HBO did a great job with Game of Thrones, obviously, but they had a Roast Joffrey, which was a site that they put up, which was basically, if you watch Game of Thrones, you hate Joffrey, right? And it's a sort of a truth to the show. And they had people submitting images about him being roasted. They had 20 deaths that were animated.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Sorry, anybody who hadn't caught up there.
No, I'm not saying that he died. Whoops. and among other things that basically allowed the fans to participate in it. And then, of course, you end up with Oreo getting involved and some of the other big social brands also participating in it, which gives you further amplification. That's stuff that is the viral part, the part that's harder to orchestrate and build upon. But that's where you really have to go for that authenticity. When you really truly understand your user base, you understand what motivates them, you've built personas or archetypes around what's going to activate them and create content specifically for that.
I thought you were going to say something.
So I was going to say that that's essentially the sort of that difference in perspective is exactly where we come from, and enabling the viewer to actually choose their own the portions that they want to see of that, and not necessarily you're creating all the versions, but you're allowing them to choose it as opposed to the technology choosing it for them and pushing it at them. And it's, there's an interesting difference in reaction to that. Yeah. And so, that's one of the things we talk about all the time is how much do we involve the content creator or some other entity other than the viewer or the user in choosing their journey. And of course, where scale is concerned, you always want to get into making it more programmatic. But how can you do that so that it's actually more programmatic down the rabbit holes that the user wants to go?
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Right.
it's interesting, the shift in perspective.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the problems we have right now is there's all the tools to allow the content to be inserted and given to the user, which is great, but you have a lot of content owners that overuse that and start providing so much to the user that it becomes a turnoff other than I want to engage.
Give an
And
example. No, seriously. Nobody will quote you. Go ahead.
Type Botox into your Gmail and then watch the Botox ads start showing up all over the internet. people find that obtrusive. Those types of techniques are currently being used by not just Google, but being sold by them and all the other ad networks. So stuff like that, users generally speaking start to react to.
I'm even talking about like pushing things to you while you're consuming video, right? So if you're
Same thing.
if you're sitting there and you're involved in a show, and I think then you're watching and everything, and there's tools that allow you to then, here's extra content, here's an ad about something related or not related, or here's some photos of the user doing something during back scene shoots, which are all great information at the appropriate time to the appropriate user. And I think one of the things we look at is at what point do users stop engaging, right? Because we provide the tools to make that happen. We find some people make it happen all the time, and we're like, well, that's probably not the best experience. What are the best practices for the right experience to the right users based on the type of content they're looking at?
And what do you think those are? I was also going to ask you, what do you think the current attention span is? Is it really short form, little short bites of content? Can you do branded long form that people will embrace?
The NFL.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Everything the NFL does across everything with how it controls, how it disseminates its video content, to how it controls its fantasy footprint, which is really its social aspect,
Right.
to everything that they've done is really the use case for what most brands want to do. They just don't have a product that people care about that
That's the point. So you look at that and you say that's the holy grail right there, the NFL, but then how do I replicate that experience?
Yeah, it's
And
like every brand who comes in and goes, oh, who do you want to be? And they all say Apple or Nike immediately, one or the other, right? And you're like, dude, you make Kleenex. It's not happening. We got to figure something else out. And it becomes a gracefully degrading version of that aspiration, I guess.
Okay. But you were talking about an example. You were giving an example. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
Well, I
interrupt.
was just even looking at some of the second screen technologies are out there to be able to provide content when you're viewing something. And I think it's way different. If you give examples, I think people watching reality shows are more open to that than people that want to dive into a drama. I think a lot of it has to do with what it is you're trying to consume on how open you are to other things at the same time.
I think we have, we're at sort of a basic level of understanding our key performance indicators. And, to this point, for the most part, it's been mass. Just how do we get more of this, more of that, more of this, more of that? And the easiest way to do that is to build really short form, snackable content.
Right.
But the reality is we all know that we enjoy movies and we enjoy TV shows and long form content. So what gives? Where's the in between? And what we're finding is that people have to start to change their expectations, and essentially the expectations of how much people will interact given the content, and how do you do it in a seamless fashion so that they can, in a long form piece, actually lean back as well as interact when they want to. And so you have to offset that need to just get these likes or views or whatever it is up front, these single sort of easy to understand metrics, and trade that off with immersion and engagement and see, to your brand, what is the value? And certainly if, you're looking to monetize long form content, you have to look for a blend of these two and understand what that blend means to you. And we're helping, do that because it's, there's so many ways to monetize long form content, but not when you're looking at just the end of the funnel, the data funnel, and looking at just these mass numbers, and not getting granular about the values specifically to your organization or your entity.
How do you message the current value of a like? What is the value? I mean, I got into a big debate with a client one day, and he said, we have 14 million likes. And I went, yeah, but what does that mean? He goes, well, I thought that's why we were hiring you. I said, yes, it was a rhetorical question, you moron. We didn't work together. That was the outcome of that one. But they were like so enamored with the number of likes. And I said, what have you done to do it? How have you, created any action around that? And they hadn't done anything. They were just basically counting numbers.
Yeah. I mean, I find with a lot of the entities that we deal with, people don't necessarily have a best practice guide to that, and understanding, how do I do more than just report up this one big number, like, great, I did this and I keep my job because we had that many likes.
Right.
And sometimes it's top down, where that's all that's required is views.
But But that's the scary thing. Again, for the folks who know me, they know I do this stuff. I went to see I went in as a social visit to a movie studio to talk to somebody in digital marketing, and I said, "So what are you doing on this upcoming film?" And they said, "Twitter and Facebook." I said, "Yeah, well, I mean, of course, but what else?" And they went, "No, Twitter and Facebook."
Right.
I said, "Why?" Because my boss understands likes and number of friends and number of views, and I can't explain anything else to him, so there's no percentage in doing anything beyond that," which was a very sad commentary on, so you're not going to try anything else? Nope, Twitter and Facebook.
Right. And not just Twitter and Facebook, but what's happening after Twitter and
Right.
Facebook, like
Exactly.
inside of those being the impetus or the generator of these user flows or these user journeys. There's so many tools that people can use in between, but they just don't know, and they may not be provided part of the tool set that, that they typically use. So,
So that's an interesting-
That's, I think, where consultants come in and
Right,
start
so that's
really helping you
when you're
understand.
taking apart something you've done, whether it's what you've done with Lexus, with L Studio, what are you using as the metrics for success? How are you analyzing post-mortem that this worked or it didn't work other
Yeah.
than your neighbor said they liked it?
Sure. So, we look at all those metrics, the views, the time spent. Time spent's really important when you're talking about content. How long is someone willing to stick with you through that experience? And, we look at the social metrics. The shares really for us is a big one when we're looking at those kind of vanity metrics, I guess you could say, the ones that are really publicly available. Shares is a big one because it's additional earned media for your content, and it also means that someone enjoyed something enough to put their own endorsement on it and help you spread it out into the world. But we even look at survey data too. We ask people before their visit and after their visit, did this change your perception of the brand in these following areas? So as much as we can, we combine the numbers with some of that survey feedback to make sure that we're achieving the goal that we're setting out to achieve.
I think having that kind of like a broad view of it is the smart thing now, because if you go just by likes, like I bought 1,700 likes on Friday for $30.
Sure.
I'm not kidding. And so, and they were all I did just because someone we were talking about it at work and ran the ad, and most of them came from not in the U.S., even though I targeted the U.S. And so that's
Well,
how
what was the
how
point
it
of
works
buying?
right now.
What was the point of buying the
To
likes?
prove a point that engagement was more important. And so that's like,
Oh, you're doing it as a
as an
right,
experiment to,
right.
to prove a point. And so, I have friends that have run, managed accounts where they had 10 million likes for their brand. And they actually reduced the number of likes by 2/3 because they had higher engagement with that audience. And so by targeting the right people and getting higher engagement, higher percentage of people engaging with the content, viewing it, sharing it, etc., their numbers actually went up as a result. So
That's
the
the
total number
value.
of likes isn't, So you have to watch all those numbers and make sure you're just choosing the right ones.
You do. And followers now is such a tricky metric because if you're talking about a platform like Facebook, if you have X number of followers, that does not mean you're reaching them organically.
So let me ask you real quick, because I worked on the automotive brands as well. You called those metrics vanity metrics, right? Because they get rolled up into what? They get rolled up into price and build and conversions at the dealerships, right? Is that sort of like did you guys ever was there pressure towards sales?
Not for L Studio specifically. So L Studio is seen as very much
Content providers,
upper funnel. So that's not where we're looking to make that conversion. The vanity metric comment was more, those are the numbers that anyone going to your site can see. Anyone going to your social channels can see. So of course everyone wants them to look.
You made
Having
a comment that I have
yeah.
to actually jump in on at the time. You said something about you do surveys afterwards, and in the survey, did watching Lisa Kudrow do web therapy change your opinion of the Lexus car brand? Is that a logical question?
So
I mean,
It is.
It is?
Of course.
isn't that what any brand
It's
is doing with
primary
any
research.
content that they're putting out there? Your goal
Because
is,
I laughed at Lisa Kudrow's show. I like Lexus better.
Well, I think
I don't-
the
aggregate
issue would
effect.
be if someone knows how to answer that question honestly.
Yeah,
Right.
there's aggregate
That's
effect.
like, does someone actually, are we contemplating that when we're watching the show that, hey,
Lexus
it's more, how does someone, I wouldn't necessarily trust myself to answer that correctly.
But there are product placement companies that's all they do is Marlboro cigarettes being the quintessential example of just psychological programming around good like it's the release of endorphins and seeing a product at the same
But I
time.
mean, when BMW did the short form movies
Right,
years
with
ago, which
Clive
is one of
Owen.
the, what?
Clive Owen, yeah.
It was Clive Owen thing, the Madonna piece. There was another one with Frankenheimer that was amazing. that was a brand that there was a strong identification with the brand that they made these really cool films that were an extension of the James Bond experience or whatever. That I would answer that question. If someone said, do you feel better about the brand? I went, wow, it was the coolest shit I ever saw. I don't know if I would, if I was watching Lisa Kudrow, feel better about Lexus. That's just me.
That's just demographic, though.
Okay.
The
I owned a Lexus. I didn't feel
Sorry,
any better about it.
You're the wrong demo. Sorry, dude.
Yeah.
Finally,
I
that's
think
it.
there's
Anybody want to take his seat up here? So, I'm sorry.
No, I just think that there's not to pump Cinematique, but essentially the video is
what
the
you're here
survey,
for. Go
right?
over.
So the video is the survey.
having this-
All this information that you're trying to take in afterwards is actually happening as using the video as the interface. And if you want to look at it from that perspective, but I think we need more technologies like that.
But I watched a football. I mean, here's another anecdote. I watched a football game yesterday. The only thing I remember about the game was I've been very anti these Shazam ads, and I've known the guys at Shazam since they started. But the call to action on TV to Shazam this ad, they had one for Coke Zero. And they said, share a Coke Zero. We're going to share a Coke Zero with everyone in the United States right now. Shazam this and share a Coke. So I did it, and the app came up with a glass filling up with Coke Zero. And at the end it said, do you want to go get it from Pizza Hut? Do you want to go get it from 7-Eleven? I clicked on 7-Eleven. I've got the coupon on my phone right now. I thought it was an amazing little activation. It worked, and it was the first time that I ever saw that Shazam made sense for that type of drawing me in. I paused. I rewound back to the beginning of the ad. I clicked, DVR, went back 30 seconds, watched it, and they got me to go to the end of the funnel, as you say. I went all the way to redemption. And I feel redeemed now.
By the way, just to answer the question on the equity around likes or any followers, they're really leads. They're Glengarry leads, right? They're the leads that you.
That's how I like you.
There you go. So
Never mind, he's not leaving.
They're the real. They're the real leads, but you have to cultivate them. They don't do anything for you sitting there, right? So how you then engage those fans who have literally turned over their list of friends and a bunch of other stuff that they shouldn't be turned over to you.
Right.
How do you then cultivate that relationship is really about you. So the bigger that number. And the better you do. And then to your point, calling that list into actual CRM is that's what a lot of companies that they did. That's what they do.
Question. Not us. Yes, you're good.
What's the minimum spend or number of users for a new campaign so that you can actually judge whether or not it's working?
How much money do you have?
Yeah, right. What kind of car did you drive up here in? Right.
No, I mean, it sort of is. That's the answer, right? So you want to go big. What's the minimum? I don't know. How much do you want to sell? In advertising, in reach, in a campaign, there is probably critical mass around you've done too much, and I'm sure we'll see it with, say, Marvel or Star Wars over the next 10 years, right? Who knows where you saturate the market? But at this point, it's a function of how much money you can spend and how big your global client base is. You can go completely crazy and spend hundreds of millions of dollars, or like Ford spends $1.x billion per year doing it, right? So there's no end to that answer.
But the early days of Google AdSense, the thing that was seductive was you have a small budget, you can spend a little bit of money, you can see if something's happening. You had a way of basically putting your toe in the water. What are other mechanisms to find out if it's even worth diving in the deep end?
Facebook has it too now. I mean, that was the experiments I ran on Friday was $30, pick your followers, pick the markets that you want, or sorry, pick the markets, pick the things that they're interested in, et cetera, and they give you a range for the number that they were going to hit, and they were true to that range. So I think you could do $5 if you wanted to, just to see does it actually matter. But
the pushback there would be that the creative content has an overhead that you need to sort of amortize.
Absolutely. Yep.
So from your experiences, and I understand that the more the merrier, where have you seen campaigns sort of useless below that number and then start to be effective?
So I mean, the old rule of advertising, or rule of thumb in advertising, was 30-70 or something like that, and so it was 30 on the creative and then 70 on the advertising. We started getting into social, and it was below, I want to say 250 or something like that as far as a budget went. Then the number really flipped, and it was 60-40 or something, because you had to put so much more into the creation that it didn't leave as much over into social. And that was, I haven't been in advertising now for 2.5 years, so you guys are going to know much better than I do at this point, but that was how things flipped back then.
It's a complicated metric too. You have to really look at your mix and decide where you're spending your money and everything from CPM through tele. I mean, it's all. There's just so many ways to reach people nowadays. When you talk about true viral content, stuff like that, who knows? I mean, your returns could be massive, but it's all kind of rolling the dice.
When you're doing a social campaign and or a viral campaign, it's a lot different than, let's say, it was 10 years ago in terms of advertisers believed that they had a certain game plan and they would do a certain number of, bus shelters, a certain amount of billboards, a certain amount whatever, to garner a certain result, and there would be a certain outcome, at least a projected outcome of the campaign. Have advertisers, for the most part, accepted that they can't control what the outcome is? That it's now in the hand of the end?
No, like 99.95% goes to programmatic, highly quantified spends in global markets for large companies. Like Johnson & Johnson has no margin for error in how much acquisition they're going to do in a quarter, but they are devoting certain percentages of their budgets to home runs, apps, cool viral stuff. And that's why you see boutique agencies with cool creative and neat ideas winning left and right in those situations.
You're saying you believe that you can still control the outcome?
I don't think that they're trying to control the outcome of those initiatives, but the outcomes are all preordained, generally speaking, on the global market for sure.
I mean, with the percentages though, like when you're looking at, you're talking about like a 0.5% or something like that to home runs. But I mean, I worked at a company where it was a large amount and it was 2%, but that was an $8 million budget to like mess around with new technology and stuff like that.
That 2% was $8 million.
Yeah.
That's
so when you're talking about media budgets for Johnson & Johnson, I don't know what they spend, but I imagine in Lexus, it's a couple bucks. Like,
well, I mean, companies like that, they'll throw $1 million at a discovery for an application.
Yeah.
Just to figure out if they really want to
make it or not.
And then by the time they figure it out, the answer is no, usually.
Yeah, I mean, with Lexus, there is so much that is, to your point, programmatic, and you're targeting and you're hitting your, third-party auto sites and your lower funnel type of stuff that will produce. But we recently, in January, we had a social campaign that we ran that was some content we were doing for social media. Lexus had put out these remote control versions of the new car.
So awesome.
And
the RC.
Yep.
really?
Yeah,
so
we
awesome.
sent them over
Let's talk
to
afterwards. Okay.
we sent them over to a guy in Japan who has a big YouTube channel where he does these tricks with remote control cars, pretty amazing stuff. And he made these videos. We made these videos with him. We put them out on social media. And next thing we know, shares are going through the roof. This is
See, now that would make me feel better about the brand.
well,
Elisa Kudrow webisode, as much as I like her, that wouldn't make me feel more inclined to buy a Lexus.
Yeah.
Which is why the commercial creative directors still make all the money. They literally hit the home run.
It's a mix. It's a balance, right? You do some of the stuff that is more vehicle focused, some that's more lifestyle, and you make sure you hit all the demographics. So yeah, it's definitely a mix. I mean, the stuff that we did with the remote control cars, like I said, went exceeded metrics on social, and we then worked with Lexus to say, hey, we can take this and make more out of this, and that ended up being the Super Bowl commercial that Lexus ran in the third quarter of the Super Bowl. So that's an instance of taking something that was created for social media, seeing that the content was really resonating, it was driving those shares, and saying, hey, we really have something here that is content that could maybe work in other platforms, from 5 days to concept approval to when we delivered the spot to the network, and then within 2 weeks the thing was on the Super Bowl.
Another perfect example of that was Fruit of the Loom. Did you guys see the Fruit of the Loom ad with the clear pants where the guys are dancing? Has everybody seen that commercial? So anyway, they're showing that the underwear doesn't ride up, so the guys are wearing clear pants, they're dancing. That commercial turned into an entire world of fashion websites, Twitter channels, actual rappers wearing the pants, them being sold on eBay for thousands of dollars, all run by my friend Dean at Wine Kennedy. So these things do happen. Like, people will they'll come up with a commercial, and that's really all it started as, was a commercial. And then a digital creative director came in and said, what if we went through the process of showing the French fashion designer that created these, and they show the process of him, walking the models around and smacking them and making them cry. It's just ridiculous and awesome. But then again, then you see a rapper, and I forget his name, but then he wears them, and then the next thing you know, it's a true viral smash for Fruit of the Loom, and they spent almost next to nothing on it. So a company will come to an advertising agency and say, do that, do that, do that. And I say, okay, how much money do you have?
But is part of that the willingness of the brand to put themselves up to, not ridicule, but to be part of the joke?
That's why Fruit of the Loom hires people like Wyden Kennedy and
Right.
Crispin
It's great.
Porter. That's why they exist. Yeah.
I mean, it's Justin Timberlake. I mean, he makes fun of himself before anybody else does. So nobody makes fun of him. Oh, yes, sir.
Hi, question. It definitely seems to be in the interests of the advertisers for this kind of content to be created. But what about artists and creators? Is there pushback from people saying, like, no, I don't want to make like product placement based programming? Because I mean, in my mind, I'm on the spectrum here. It seems kind of silly to me that creators would say, oh, the premier art form is 23-minute videos in between 3-minute commercial breaks. Versus like when television was first created, when they'd interrupt a show and then hawk some product on stage. But like, especially the best artists, are they saying like, no, integrating advertising into the content, that's something that we can't do?
I mean, you see the best filmmakers embracing short form content all over the place, like for creating parallel story arcs, and really the ones who do that, I think, do the best because you can monetize that. If it's done poorly and you try to monetize it, then it's bad all the way around. I mean,
Yeah, I think product placement is sort of it's not a new thing. Obviously, it's been in every film we ever watched. Outside of some of the Criterion collection, it's just now that it's being monetized on the front end, or the back end of the experience, rather than being sold up front. We have everyone just throwing things up over top of videos that's making it seem like, oh my God, if I put product placement in my video, or I try and make a commercial entity out of my video, it's going to ruin my creative integrity, and this thing is going to suck. And so it's, from what we're seeing, that's a false fear that's created essentially by technology that isn't built for the user, but is actually built, for brands and marketers to pump them before they actually create a better experience. And they create, for the content creators who are essentially seeing it as themselves as viewers, they think it sucks.
the parallel being spam, right?
Right. But
I mean, there's a
but then you can
technology called
absolutely-
Myriad. Have you seen Myriad?
Yeah.
So Myriad is virtual product placement. So it can change the movie poster in the fall run of a show versus the rerun in the spring. The movie poster that you're walking by is a current movie poster.
Right.
Current to now the spring. Things like that are not intrusive, and they actually enhance. They don't enhance the experience, but they don't interfere with the experience.
Right. And I think, everyone's starting just to adjust. There's always going to be some sort of resistance to the fact that this is just now part of it. Like, branded content and advertorial and all these things are part of it. And it's just another thing that drives the end product, the sort of the function driving fashion. It's something as content creators we're all starting to adapt to. But what people are turning to are these technologies that actually make it interesting and seamless that these things are integrated, as well as platforms that help indie content creators or prosumer content creators actually source and integrate product into their films. I think those technologies are on the rise, and we're starting to see it all become relatively seamless, and it will eventually be, from a user-first perspective, a benefit to all the advertisers.
I'm just hoping we get past the chalk on the blackboard moment when you're watching Hawaii Five-0 and McGarrett says, somebody Bing that really quickly.
Right.
Somebody go Bing that, and you go, who says that?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the art of it, right?
Right.
That's part of it. It always has been.
Right.
People have been masterful since the beginning of cinema to put integrate things in that wouldn't necessarily be in part of the story.
Right.
Yeah.
So is there Alexis in the next Star Wars movie?
Probably.
Okay, probably.
I mean, I will say, I think that's a little bit the idea of product placement and content creators is definitely related to the L Studio conversation. What was being challenged a little bit of does it move the needle for the brand if there's not that really obvious, moment of here's
No,
the
but it's
car
the
in your
question,
face.
does it make you feel better about the brand? Is it cool the brand did it? Yeah, absolutely. Does it make me more likely to buy a Lexus? That's a different. I mean, it's how those questions. It's almost
Right.
like
It's
polling
how the-
questions.
Right, it's how
What
the
do you get
question is
for it?
asked.
Would you elect a
Exactly.
socialist? No, I don't know.
But by the way, this question, the bigger question that we're talking about right now, is answered through technology over the next 10 years or so. The way that biometrics, the Internet of Things, and new structures to database or content databases are going to all come together into this sort of future where marketing doesn't hurt, right? That it isn't, that it is things you opt into, that it is things your friends like, that they are going to get to you in a way that makes sense. It's just going to be sort of weird getting there. You know, the push notifications and beacons and things being shoved in your face, Minority Report style. That's not our future. That's our present.
Question?
Yeah, I had a question. I was curious as to the success of the national spots that tell you to go to a website to get the rest of the story. If you guys, like, that seems to be happening more and more. I was curious if you feel like that, you know, that's.
I like them.
That Chevy spot killed it with, you know, with the dad in his car. They had the extended stuff like that. It's all about the content. Like, it's about the content, the target, when you showed the ad, and then you'll have success.
Yeah, we see heavy
Becky.
conversion.
Yes, yes, ma'am. Who are you?
Or not.
Back to olden times, one of my favorite ad campaigns was the Absolute Vodka campaign.
Oh,
where
yes.
It was, you know, Absolute Miami or Absolute whatever. It started out as a campaign where Absolute was associating with other cool things to become cool, and then ultimately became
The cool
whatever
thing.
they
Yeah.
associated with became cool because Absolute put their name on it. Is there anything that you see today that has that kind of cachet, a brand that has that cachet and is using that method of advertising?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Red Bull, yeah.
Red Bull's the yes, exactly. Red Bull invented an entire action sports vertical, and everything about that became sort of a reverse paradigm.
You know, I mentioned the Oreo thing a while ago. If you guys remember back to the Super Bowl, this is a very small social media, but in the social media world, when the lights went out at the Super Bowl and Oreo tweeted the picture of them, what was it? It was the picture of the cookie and they needed milk, or they responded like right away. They had a writer out, they had a picture, and it was tweeted out almost immediately. And because of that, they blew up as this like social channel that people wanted to hear from, that always had something witty to say. And now when they like bless your social campaign with something witty about you, it has that sort of cachet for whatever reason. But I don't know, it's kind of silly. It's not absolute.
In both terms. 4 minutes. Yes. Question in the back there. Loudly.
Yeah, great story. Distinctions between push and pull product placement. In other words, a lot of content creators are going to brands and saying, please give us some money. So they're requesting it versus the brand pushing it onto a content creator. Distinctions between the two. Like, is it usually smaller brands that are more amenable to doing things to up and coming content creators, or is it that the bigger Lexuses are actually saying, hey, there's a lot of new younger guys out there doing interesting stuff? How's it working now, and then how's that going to be working in the future?
It's almost all budget driven, so the big brands control whatever they want to control. If they want to go down into the zeitgeist of the day and pick out YouTubers and embrace them, that's what they'll do. So it's all budget driven. Small brands reaching up toward, I think more than brands, it's talent, right? So if you think of what CAA, William Morris, these guys are all buying digital agencies because they're looking to go direct. So there's this underlying war between the channels and how everybody's trading in this equity of talent and what people really want to see, and there's absolutely no winners yet.
I saw it happening in two different ways. One of them was with media, just the value add spend. So you buy a certain amount of media, and then you get some integration with like a football game or something like that. Maybe integration with a show. On the flip side, the reason that we saw Bing, have you binged that question, was because Microsoft and Apple both did a really great job of basically getting in with the producers and in with the show creators and working their product in the show. For an exchange for product, they were willing to put it into the show. And there wasn't a lot of money that changed hands, but there was a lot of product that changed hands. So Apple put up editing bays, high-end machines for people to edit on the fly, on location, really smart.
But in the same show, they succeeded with the Surface table.
Totally.
When you see that table, you go, I want that.
Yeah.
But when
yeah.
someone says, did you Bing that? You go, oh, no.
I know, it hurts.
It hurts.
Yeah.
By the way, you'll see an interesting push-pull question tonight is who got the bigger benefit, Star Wars or the NFL? For this trailer is going to be premiered during Monday Night Football. And I bet you those numbers are just going to be sort of astronomical. Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
you should.
Well, the bigger question is going to be what happens once that commercial airs. Is going to be a prompt to buy the tickets immediately from a
passive channel of
Right.
all the distributors, or you go directly to your theater? Is Disney going to request your email address? How's that going to work out as well?
Yeah.
My guess is who asked where all this goes. It's further alignment around things like that, right? Unified business plans around, platforms that come together to monetize at the highest degree. So the NFL, Disney, and the theaters getting together to push tickets at a specific time seems to make a lot of sense. My guess is that meeting probably happened.
So if you could all fix one thing for me when you go home today is, can you make them stop sending me ads on Facebook for something I just bought a minute ago on Amazon?
I know, right?
Hi, would you like to buy this? I just did.
Yeah.
That's the one thing. Anybody else, sir? I think we'll wind it up. We're on time right now. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of Digital Hollywood. Thank you, guys. So is that okay?
That was great.